Everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be looking at the AD carry tier list for patch 12.8. So as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It helps out a ton on the channel. Check out the support tier list if you haven't already done so. I'll put a link to it here at the beginning in the upper right if you want to check that out. And we're streaming a lot more now, so we're back on YouTube streaming, and we're going to be going from, I would like to start around 9 p.m. and usually go till about 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So come by, check it out. Very friendly community. I might even do some afternoon streams, particularly during the summer, and I'll keep you posted about those. And I might play some other games as well, too, during those afternoon streams. The nighttime streams will, as of right now, those are planned to all be League of Legends, but I might do some other games like some Total War or something else during the day as well. Just to give people a chance, especially our European friends that might have a hard time making the night streams, a chance to come by at least once or twice a week and hang out during a daytime stream. But anyways, okay, let's go ahead and get in here. So I think the meta has shifted quite a bit, even from a couple of patches ago, in terms of which ADCs are strong right now. So let's go ahead and get in here and talk about it. So number one is Lucian, and I feel like he's kind of almost come out of nowhere to some extent, because it seems like he's always been pretty strong in general. Let me pull up the analytics here. Like, he's always had big numbers, but his problem in lane was he just is such short range, and in the late game, his team fighting wasn't amazing. But now, I think it's because a lot of the like long range lane dominant champions have been nerfed. So things like Caitlyn has been nerfed, Jinx has been nerfed to an extent on this patch, that it has created a space for Lucian to bully early on and then take that advantage that he gets early and then pressure for early dragons, early towers, and just kind of snowball his leads from there. So I feel like the games I've seen Lucian, he's really strong, and he has a pretty high win rate. I think even just a few patches ago, I don't know how long back we can see his win rates, but for the last 14 days, I guess it's been about the same at higher levels. But he just feels really, really strong right now. Tons of damage. So what is it about that? I think the nerf to the sustain items also helps him. So now he can take bigger trades early, and people aren't going to be able to sustain through it as easily. So the fact that, Shield Bow got nerfed, Gorge, well, in bottom lane they're not getting Gore Drinker, but a lot of the sustain early was nerfed, so that's going to help him out also with his trades. A few other things that they buffed about him, I don't have it here, but pretty much a couple of patches ago, they changed his AD ratio on his second passive, so when someone shields or heals you, it now has a 0.2 instead of a 0.1, which is really good. And then the mana cost on his Q also went down, I think by 10 per level, so you can spam that a lot more in the laning phase, get more harassment, take more trades. So both of those have helped him out, but really I think it is just the fact that some of the other longer range premier bullies, specifically Caitlyn and Jinx to a lesser extent, have been nerfed quite a bit and have fallen out of the meta. And so he's really good at brawling and fighting some of these other particularly short range champions like Kai'Sa, like Vayne, who are both very popular in the early game. So PTA is still really strong early on. Getting to Gale Force. Gale Force has always been strong, but again, the fact that its competitors, the Shield Bows, that type of stuff, has taken a hit, makes Gale Force even stronger by comparison. And then Essence Reaver has kind of come up as a pretty strong item as well. They did reduce the cost a while back to 2,800 gold, so he can come online a lot faster. Okay. And then taking the being able to take that Sheen early on does give you, again, a little bit more capabilities to pressure people. So he's just a premier bully. Pairs really well with things like Nami, who's pretty good in the meta. Just any sort of enchanter is going to be pretty strong. So I think it's just a good confluence of items. Now, it's interesting that he's taking Treasure Hunter. That would allow you to get to your items faster, especially if you can force kills early on. And then the Taste of Blood does give you some sustain. So overall, great champ. His team fighting is a little better also if you go crit than it used to be in the past. I believe they buffed the scaling of the crit on his ultimate a while back. So like the on hit builds, the stuff with like Blather and King, I think in general is a little bit weaker if we're looking at that as like a second item. But going Essence, Reaver, or Collector are both really good options after that. So great if you want a super aggressive, hard snowball champ early on. And he does like pretty good skirmishing and heavy damage later on in the game as well. Not as much like 5-on-5 team fighting as other champions, but I would say he's the premier skirmisher ADC. Certainly at like 2 items in the mid game, he's going to be pretty good. Vayne might overtake him later, but early on, just with that burst, he's going to be solid. And I think the meta as well is kind of shifting away from the 5v5 teamfight comps. There are still some of those, but you aren't seeing as many of like the big hard engaged tanks from other roles. Like you are seeing some Malphites, some Orns, but it still feels like it's split pushers and skirmishers. And then in the jungle as well, it feels like a lot of it are like, you know, just fighters. Like we aren't seeing the Sejuanis, the Zacs, and things like that. And that's really where Lucian's going to be at his weakest, is against a 5v5 team fight comp that has a really strong front line, because he doesn't have many AoE abilities. It's all about just single target bursting someone out. And he's short range, so it can be more dangerous to step up closer in those types of situations, versus something like a Jinx or a Twitch is going to excel in those long range fights. So I have Jinx up here too. I think she's pretty good as well, but Lucian is definitely the premier skirmisher, extremely strong right now. Is the damage is just absolutely mind-blowing in the early game. If you pair him with something like a Nami, it's crazy. Okay, and then I've got Jinx. Now, she did get a substantial nerf on this patch, and her win rate's not going to be as impressive as some of the other champs. She's actually negative in the win rate department, but she's still Jinx. She still has a lot of power. She is a lot more vulnerable to all-ins early, because she did lose that 50 HP on this patch. So that is a problem, and they did nerf, I believe it was the mana, I think it was maybe the range on the rockets early, but once you get to level 9, it's still the same thing. It's just her early game is a lot weaker than it was, but you can still push and control waves really well with the rockets, and you still do have pretty decent poke with your Q. You've got some okay like follow up engage with your chompers, so she can still fight, she can still get kills, but her late game is still going to be in the dominant position that it was in, and that's really why you're picking her, I think, is for that mid to late. Once she gets those 3 items, she just has such insane range with lethal tempo and gets those crazy resets in team fights that she's still going to be incredibly powerful. Now, I personally, it depends on the comp, but I would think that Hurricane is probably a lot better than either of these two. Although I guess statistically, Phantom Dancer is the best second item. I still really, really like Hurricane in those team fights with the Rockets. But again, we're kind of moving away from that 5v5 organized team fights with the tanks. So maybe that's why people are moving away from Hurricane. But I still think that Jinx is going to be really good. Now, as you can see, you know, her win rate did drop quite a bit, like 2% on this patch. So that is something to, you know, be aware of. But nevertheless, I still think she's super dangerous if she can get out of the laning phase. You just gotta be a little more cautious than you have been in the past. So yeah, still a top tier champion. And then Miss Fortune's another one that I think is gaining some prominence, particularly as some of the other longer range bullies, Caitlyn, Jinx, you know, have been hit a little bit. Then Miss Fortune is becoming a lot more viable, especially as this sort of early game poke, almost caster type of champion, almost like a mage. So it looks like a lot of people are maxing E. I don't know about the full-on max. It does do quite a bit of damage with the 220. It does improve the slow, but Miss Fortune just has a lot of utility. So you do have that poke early with the E. If you do go tier into Manamune, that does help out. I believe when this is fully charged, it will also do that physical damage on the initial hit, I think, with the E. And then that does allow you to go for Eclipse, and that is Omnivamp on the Eclipse, so that does allow you to, you know, heal up off of your E, off of your ultimate, and if you hit 2 separate abilities or attacks, then you get that extra shield and extra damage. So if you E and then ultimate, it's going to trigger it. when you hit people with it. So she's got the slow. It's a point click. It's really good range. I think it's 1,000 range. They're going to get hit with Comet. They're going to get Muramana triggered on them. They're going to get the potential for Eclipse to be triggered on them. It holds them still while your ultimate's channeling. It allows your allies to hit better skill shots, so it's going to let the Leona hit her R, Nautilus, Thresh, Blitzcrank, whoever to hit their hooks. So it's really good utility overall. Just 1 point in the W is nice because it gives you that extra, potential 40% move, or that's attack speed, flat 55 movement speed as you're running around the map. So it's almost like you get free Mobies in a lot of situations, so it's pretty good. And then the Q is okay. You do have to get closer for that. It is pretty good at harassing early, but with this particular kind of build, I think they're just going for the E harassment, and then you're just kind of an ult bot later on. You're just looking to line up those perfect ultimates for the team fights. So it's just going to be Eclipse, Muramana, and then probably just Collector. Collector is very nice because your E is going to constantly apply extra damage, and then obviously your ultimate's going to apply really rapid damage as well. So that's just increasing amount of checks that are going to allow you to execute them so that you get that kill on the Collector, so you can snowball and your support's not accidentally going to take a kill with Ignite or something like that. So really versatile. Going to be a bit weaker against tanks because you're not going to have a lot of armor penetration with this build. You do get Sereldas eventually, but again, there aren't that many tanks floating around the meta, so I still think she's going to be pretty strong. It looks like a lot of people are going, I guess, Dark Harvest with her. I'm not sure if that or Comet are better. My instinct is that Comet might be better. Comet's certainly better in the early game for harassing, and it looks like Comet is far more popular. You do get Mana Flow Band, which not only gives you more mana early for mana management, but that 250 mana also gets converted over to AD off of the Muramana once you complete it. So that is good. Treasure Hunter would be nice as well, but also being able to go for like the free boots and Cosmic Insight's pretty good too. So there are a few different options on her, but yeah, Premier, skirmisher, team fighter type of champion. So not great against tanks, but if it's a bunch of squishies, in a team fight, you're probably going to delete them with your ultimate. And then Jhin, I still think is really good. Again, kind of like the other champs, I think he has been a beneficiary of the fall of Caitlyn and sort of the slight step down of Jinx. So a lot of people are still going the Gale Force, like Collector, crit build. Now, I personally think that you really need to go Infinity Edge third. It is a lot more expensive than Rapid Fire Cannon, so it's going to depend on the situation. But going like 2 Zeal items does leave you pretty low. I guess that's not technically a Zeal item, the Collector isn't, but just without having that modifier, I feel like it's a lot weaker. But the build path is kind of lame. It's very expensive at 3,400. It does involve a BF sword, which kind of sucks. The rapid fire is much faster at 2,500. I thought it was actually 2,600. I didn't realize they made it that cheap. So I don't know. Maybe rapid fire is better. It does give you more utility with the movement speed. So I still feel like Infinity is, if you have the money for it, that's just going to give you more burst. But maybe rapid fire is better if they have a bunch of scary, squishy champions that could blow you up and you really want that range. But maybe Infinity is better for knocking down the tanks. I'm not really sure. But Jhin does provide quite a bit of utility, and they did buff him on this patch. I think the W got an extra 0.25 seconds, so that is a lot for an ability of 1.25 seconds extra root that has that kind of range is really powerful. And then your E got some kind of buff. I think the cooldown reduction is a little bit lower, so you can throw out more traps. So I thought Jhin was pretty good already. I mean, he didn't need those buffs, but it is good that he got them. So overall, strong champion, good bully early, good wave clear, excellent engage combo potential with the W's. You can follow up on the Leona, the Nautilus, whatever that's getting in there. Then you have a pretty good ability to execute people with the ult. Now, I will say, I see a lot of people make mistakes with that ultimate. You really want to be in there actually auto-attacking and repositioning, if possible, in fights. You only want to use your ult, I think, if someone is out of range, if you're not going to be able to run them down, or or like for some reason you just cannot get to the fight, you're just not going to be in time, and you just want to use that ult to slow people down and do some damage, it's okay. But I see too many people sit there and start channeling that ult when they could just be auto attacking. And auto attacks, I feel like, are going to be a lot more powerful most of the time. They're just going to do more damage than the ultimate shots. You're going to be charging up to get to your fourth shot. You're going to be able to reposition. You're going to be more aware of your surroundings, because when you zoom in with that sniper of Jhin, you're opening yourself up to get flanked. Or just hit by skill shots or whatever. So that's one thing I would say if you like to play Jhin a lot, is to sort of focus on trying to position and landing autos unless you absolutely can't, and then use your ultimate to try to finish people off instead of using it prematurely. But anyways, those I think are the top 4. If you go down from there, in a lot of situations, these champions are just not going to be as solid all the time, but they can still be great quite a bit of the time. So first up, I've got Ezreal. Again, a beneficiary of other bullies getting nerfed, so he gets more time in the laning phase. Everybody knows that Ezreal is not typically insane during the laning phase. He needs time to charge up his tier. He needs an item or two. Some more recent builds that are going for like Essence Reaver, I think, have found success. Triforce, actually, that Essence Reaver is actually kind of bad on him. The Triforce seems like a much better option. I'm not 100% sure like what's up with that. I guess Triforce gives you more survivability with the 300 health. Maybe the 10 AD doesn't matter as much. Maybe the attack speed is useful. The movement speed is probably really good for kiting. And because you already have Mura mana, maybe you just don't need the mana regen off of Spellblade. So it might be the case where Essence just kind of feels good because you're getting more mana. But that critical strike is kind of wasted a lot on Ezreal because you're not going to get a lot of critical modifiers, and your Q also can't crit. So that is a little awkward. So definitely consider going Trinity. It's underutilized, but, you know, has a 5% higher win rate off of still a pretty good representation for 35,000 games. So definitely think about that. And you've got your Mura mana. Then after that, you have several different options. You know, Serelda's is always pretty solid. If you're against a ton of AD, assassins, or whatever, Frozen Heart is good, because that not only gives you survivability, but it also gives you a little bit more AD off of your Mura mana. So that's what I typically see. Sometimes you'll see a Duskblade if someone goes like Mura mana first and then Essence Reaver and then Duskblade. That's okay. But again, I am a pretty big proponent of Mura mana, Triforce, and then either Serelda's or Frozen Heart in a lot of situations. But he's versatile. He's very mobile. He's tanky. If your support wants to roam around a lot, he can usually hold the wave by himself, just, you know, last hitting with Qs. They did buff his ultimate on this patch. I believe they lowered the cooldown by a significant amount, so now late game you can push those side waves, or you can just kind of fish for ultimate hits to see if you want to start a fight or not. There are a lot of different uses for that ultimate. So he's good. Very high skill cap. You have to practice him a lot to get proficient on him. But if you can play him and just kind of never die and constantly put out a little bit of that harassment damage, I think he can be quite strong. Vayne is another one who has a high win rate. I'm always a little reluctant to recommend Vayne just because her early game is so weak and her utility is lacking compared to some of the other ones. She's just strictly auto attacks, but she's very good at skirmishing, particularly if the enemy does happen to have some tanks or they don't have like a lot of burst damage to threaten you in team fights. Then I think she can be pretty good. So again, not a lot has changed, but Caitlyn is historically one of her hardest matchups, and Caitlyn is atrocious on this patch. So that's really good news for her. And she does have the option of going Kraken. That's a lot more damage most of the time she wants to do that. So the nerf to things like Shield Bow do benefit her to some extent. And then you also have some interesting defensive options, like Wit's End is actually quite good on her. So if they do have a lot of burst magic damage, that can be really handy. Blade of the Ruined King in certain matchups can be good. So there are several options that you can sort of do with Vayne to make her strong. She does have the weak laning phase. Like I said, the trades are kind of bad. She doesn't have abilities that actually do damage unless you pin someone into a wall with your E. So you just kind of farm it up. But then once you get like one or two items, then it's kind of off to the races. And she does scale really well with a lot of different utility items that your supports might get. So great with Shirellia is being able to constantly reposition. Really solid with something like an Ardent Sensor or a Zeke's, just because you're going to be attacking so rapidly and putting out so much damage. So pretty good with lethal tempo as well. Gives you that extra little bit of range, which is something that historically she's been lacking quite a bit. Having that 600 range, on a champion that's that mobile is really powerful. So she's great if you can get out of the laning phase. If you're against an easy laner like an Ezreal or like a Kai'Sa, those are going to be the places where she really excels. Twitch, perennially underrated. A lot of people just don't like the rat. I think he's actually pretty well positioned here. He has a highest win rate of anyone we've mentioned so far at 53. And Twitch is a good mixture of a lot of utility that he brings to the table. Number one, he can go invisible, and especially at kind of the lower elo brackets, gold, silver, bronze. People just never respect that invisibility. So if you ever get ahead, he has to be one of the best snowball champions, because you can just keep coming back and effectively ganking your own lane over and over and over again. You can go gank other lanes. Just nobody respects his invisibility. So if you have kill threat on him, you can just kill him over and over again. So that's really handy. Also, invisibility in team fights, you can hang out invisible and wait until the enemy uses all their crowd control. Most supports are not going to be patient enough. If it's the Leona or the Nautilus, they're just going to blow their cooldowns on the first person they see. So if you just chill and wait for those cooldowns, then you pop up max range with your ult and start cranking, a lot of times they won't have an answer to you because they won't suspect that you're going to be there. So that's really strong. In the laning phase, the casket, the W, is actually like a pretty reasonable threat for all ends. It depends on the matchup. You throw that casket on them and start auto-attacking. Most people can't trade back very well because you're already going to have like 3 stacks on them right from the outset. And if you get those 6 stacks of poison and then can expunge them with the E, that's a lot of damage at any point in the game, but especially early game. So he actually has pretty good trades early. And it's okay wave clear. It's not insane, but it's alright. In terms of wave clear. So the W is okay. The expunge obviously is a ton of damage later on in the game. And then your R, I believe they either lowered the cooldown or they increased the AD on this a little bit. They may have increased the AD by like 10 a few patches ago. But they did a little something to buff Twitch. One thing to keep in mind with this ability is remember that whenever you shoot through other targets, you're losing damage. A lot of damage. So do not ever shoot this ultimate through a minion wave if you can at all help it. That's a huge rookie mistake that I see is people try to open up in the middle of a wave and start firing. You lose a ton of damage by doing that, so don't do that. Make sure you're firing open field and stay at a reasonable distance away. Remember, this ability can give you up to like 800 range because it gives you 300 attack range. So why are you not using that range? I see so many people open up at like 200 range with Twitch and start firing, and the reason they do that is they want to kill them even if they flash, so they're kind of greeting. But then that gives them a chance to hit you back too, right? So like, what if the support rolls up and CCs you when you do that? Or what if the jungler comes out of nowhere when you do that? So you're just really putting yourself at risk if you try to open on them at 300 range versus 850. So don't be greedy. Just use that range. Open on them from a long distance. And, if they use their flash, they use their flash. That's fine. Now, if you're super far ahead and you have great vision and you know no one else is going to interrupt that fight, okay, you can maybe open up a little closer if it's a guaranteed deal. But I just see Twitches do that so often when it's not guaranteed, and they get into trouble. Now, PTA is also really good on him because it's going to trigger and do the base damage, but usually you're still stacking up your poison stacks, and by the time your expunge is ready, you're already going to have the press the attack good to go. So that'll do that extra 12% from all sources, and I believe that includes true damage. So the expunge itself does physical damage, but I believe the passive poison stacks themselves do the true damage. So pretty powerful capabilities. You could do lethal tempo, but the thing is you just want them dead as fast as possible. So in a lot of fights, you're not going to get that stacked up 6 times. The fight's already going to be over. So you just want to make sure everyone's getting blown up, and that's why I think press the attack is the preferred rune. Now, Collector is good against single targets, but Hurricane is also really good in team fights, because each one of those Hurricane bolts will also apply your poison to other targets, and I believe the Hurricane bolts match your auto attack range, so you have 800 range on these bolts now, versus in the past, I think it used to stick to your normal auto attack range, or there was like a certain limit to it. It wouldn't go all the way up to 800. Now, it does look like most people are going with Collector and that it has a higher win rate. I think that's probably correct because the lethality is so strong early on with the Expunge, because it has such a high base damage, that's probably a good call. Collector in general is just busted. I mean, I think most people understand that. But yeah, I think Twitch is in a really solid spot as long as you feel they're not going to bully you too hard in the early game. I think he can trade a lot better than like an Ezreal and a Vayne early, so that's good. But you're still definitely not trading with Lucian and probably not Misfortune or Jhin in the early game. So it kind of depends on the support situation, but you want to be careful. He's particularly good with either Yuumi or Lulu. Yuumi because she can go invisible with him once you snowball and get ahead, and then Lulu because you just dramatically amplify his kill threat, you know, with your attack speed buff and your on hit or your on attack buff with your picks. And then your ultimate, you know, protects him so people can't dive him when he opens up. So anyways, Twitch, super strong. Tristana is another one that I think is a little underrated. It's pretty strong. Now, she is somewhat situational in that you do kind of need an aggressive lane and you do need to try to snowball early. She has a lot of power with that. If you have Hail of Blades, it allows you to stack up your explosive shot a lot more. So that's good. And then being able to jump in with your W, get those resets on your jump by triggering the full bomb explosion, then getting a second jump makes it almost impossible to get away from her if she gets ahead. So Tristana is one of the most obnoxious snowballing champions in the game. So she's great to pair with other kill lanes like a Leona, like a Nautilus, who can hold people still for you to land that jump on them and blow them up. However, the big problem with Tristana is she can't control the wave very well. The minion, she has to have that explosive shot on at all times when you level it. So that makes it really hard for her to, it hurts her precision with how she positions the wave. So it's really hard to freeze it outside your tower, or even last hit under the tower, because the explosion is just going to make the HP bars a little weird. So very difficult if you're getting pushed in, if you're getting pressured early, if you're getting bullied. Really hard to manage that with Tristana. You're going to fall even further behind in CS than most other AD carries would. However, if you're threatening them, then she can still be good. You can't freeze with her, so that is kind of a thing. If you're trying to freeze outside of the tower so that you can get that engage and jump on them with the Leona or the Nautilus, that's rough. But then she is good at pushing, so if you do push them into their tower and you want to dive, she can't do that really efficiently with her passive on explosive shot, and then sometimes even just dropping the bomb itself on there. If you just want to clear it and get a good back timing or something, she can do that. Now, she does also have really good tools against divers. So your W has this buffer timer where when people try to latch onto you, you can buffer that W and get away. Even if they hit you with the blitz hook or whatever, you can still jump out of it. And it's like 900 range, so that's really powerful if you time that correctly. And then you also have your R, which can blow back multiple targets. You only target one person, and it only does damage to one person. But if a bunch of people are grouped together, it will push everybody back a certain amount of range. So really good at peeling if they're going to have divers, and she does get pretty long range later on in the game. But yeah, primarily you want to snowball, you want to get kills early, and just sort of take over from there, because her team fighting damage is going to be somewhat limited, similar to Lucian. You want to snowball early with her. Okay, last few and then we'll call it a video. I don't want it to be too long. Samira is still pretty good, despite the fact that they did nerf the lifesteal items. It's also beneficial that they nerfed Caitlyn for her. They nerfed Caitlyn, Jinx, and you know, some of these other early game bullies. So that is good. If you can dive, you can start taking over. She's really good if the enemy has a lot of melee, particularly melee that's not going to be able to heavily threaten you, or that you can absorb some of their abilities with her W. So, very strong follow-up champion, particularly if you have a knock-up. So, something like a Rakan or even like a Nautilus, his hook counts as a knock-up when you pull someone to displace them. So, just being able to use that passive and combo that together with various champs is handy. Kind of like Yasuo, not quite as synergistic, but still going to be pretty good. So, she's okay. I think she does take a lot of practice. She can get bullied early, but if she does get ahead, then she does offer a lot of teamfight damage, especially against melees later on in the game. Ashe is another one who is alright right now. I don't think she's amazing, but she does bring a lot of utility. With her slows, it makes it easier to hit skill shots to find engages. You have your R to pair together. Her damage is going to be a little bit lower than some of the other champs, but if you already have tons of damage on your team, she can bring you some good utility. Kog'Maw is somewhat situational, but he does have a high win rate, and his scaling is extremely powerful. He's pretty straightforward, pretty easy to play. So that W, if you have anyone on your team that can give you attack modifiers, like a Lulu, Yuumi, something like that, is going to be very strong. And it's mixed damage. It does the physical damage and the magic damage, so it's really hard to itemize against that. The ultimate does provide some poke, but it doesn't give you a lot of threat in all-in situations. So other champs that have more impactful ultimates might, just express more power in team fights, something like a Misfortune. But as far as long range, single target, just melt people if you go unchecked, Kog'Maw's still going to be one of the best in the game. Like I said, specifically with Lulu, that's an insane combination if you can put those two together. So it's because she gives him everything he wants: movement speed, attack speed, on hit damage with picks, and that protection off the R. It's just a classic combo that's incredibly powerful. Zeri has been nerfed a ton, and her win rate is not great. It's like 45% right now, so it's actually quite bad. But I think if you are proficient on Zeri and you're building the right items, she can still work. I could see putting her down in C tier. But I still think the skill cap is there if you're really good on her and you get the items. She is somewhat unique that she can build tankier items like Titanic Hydra and still, be very powerful and do a ton of damage. Xayah did just get nerfed on this patch, so people were maxing the Q and going for like airy poke. I don't know if that's the play anymore. It might just be better to go for some kind of crit build like Gale Force, Essence Reaver type of thing. She is very good against divers with the feathers. She does have the ultimate, which is quite good against things like Nautilus or other champions that are difficult to avoid if you don't have something to go untargetable. So she's okay. I think that was definitely an injury to her best build, but she's still alright. Okay, Aphelios still has the potential to be really strong, but kind of like Zeri, has a really low win rate. You just have to not only personally play around the correct guns for the right situation, but you have to ping your team and convince your team to play around your guns in the right situation. So, in other words, you need to be forcing fights when you have the red plus white gun, that type of thing. It's really, really strong in team fights. So, just being able to coordinate all that can be tricky, but if you're a really good Aphelios player, you can make it work. Caitlyn, as I said before, she's kind of fallen from grace. They did nerf the wave clear on her Q, but if you can bully really well with her, if you make good use of those traps to protect yourself and to harass people under tower, I still think she can be like pretty good. But you got to basically overperform the average in order to make Caitlyn work. So she can work, but it's difficult. It's difficult to happen. Senna is a really good support right now for solo queue. It's not really translating into ADC for some reason. I'm not 100% sure what's up with that. It might just be that with gold she doesn't scale as well, but just with the souls she scales pretty well for a support. So I'm not 100% like what's up with that, but there's a pretty big discrepancy of 3 or 4 win percentage between the support and the ADC role. So she's okay. She brings some pretty good utility, but there's just something that holds her back in the bot lane. Draven is like okay if you can snowball really hard, but he has very limited utility later on. I don't think that the mythic items and other items particularly suit him super well right now. But if you are a good Draven player, if you do get that extra gold and snowball hard, he can do pretty well. Kai'Sa, I think, is probably one of the most overrated, if not the most overrated ADC right now. She's super popular, but I just feel like every time I have her in lane, she just doesn't do anything. Like, she's short range, the rockets are okay, but a lot of people love to go tier on her early, and, you know, that slows you down a lot because you don't have that much harassment. Like, if you're going for, like, you know, misfortune with tier, that translates into more damage on the enemy because you just spam your E with Comet or Dark Harvest or whatever and you get value out of it. With Kai'Sa, it's like, you can use more rockets, I guess, but it's so hard to position to have those do meaningful damage to the enemy. And then that's going to slow down your transformation to your evolved Q. So, and if you're going for the AP build, they just nerfed that really hard. I think it went from like a 0.7 on the W down to a 0.4. So anyways, I have not been too impressed with Kai'Sa. I've seen some games where she does okay, but I just feel like it takes so long and the payoff is just way better. If you just want to take a while to come online and then take over the game, just play something like Vayne, or Jinx, if that's what you want to do. So I think the main reason to play Kai'Sa before was the weird AP poke build that she had, but I think they've nerfed that and there's just no reason to really play her over the other champs unless you just love Kai'Sa. But anyway, Sivir is situationally, like, okay. I think the lethality build is what most people are doing. It does offer pretty good poke. She obviously has good wave clear, good utility with her ultimate if you have a bunch of bruisers on your team. Good into something like Caitlyn because you can just absorb those traps now and get extra mana, but Caitlyn has fallen off the meta a little bit. A lot of people aren't picking her. So she's okay. She's not, like, unplayable, but I think there are better choices a lot of times. And then Varus, they did buff him, I think, recently. I don't remember everything they did to him, but it's like, okay, but I think there probably are just better options. His numbers are just kind of low. The on-hit builds with, like, you know, Blade of the Ruined King, Ginsu's, and things like that are kind of not fantastic right now. And then I think his poke build with lethality just doesn't quite have enough kick to it. I'm not entirely sure, like, what's up with that, but I feel like I'd probably rather just play Ezreal if you want, like, a poke ADC. He does have his ultimate, which is nice for team fights, but he just feels a little underwhelming. And then Kalista, it just seems really bad right now. I wouldn't play her. I mean, you can make her work, but again, those on-hit type of builds with the Blade of the Ruined King, Hurricane, or Ginsu, usually you don't get Ginsu on her, but that type of stuff just takes too long to come online. And so much of the meta right now is all about the burst and, you know, needing to stick somebody with like 10 spears or something before you can blow them up. This takes way too long in a lot of situations. So, anyways, okay. That's going to be it for this video. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed it. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Who are the ADCs you've been paying attention to? Who did I overlook? I didn't cover like some of the mages or alternative ADCs, the stuff like Ziggs. But I don't think they're that great right now, the Veigar, but it is possible if your team does need AP. I have seen it work. But yeah, let me know what you think. Check out the support tier list if you haven't already. Come by, hang out on stream with us. Very friendly, chill community. We'd love to have you. Like I said, I'm probably going to start around 9 or 10 and go till 2 or 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So come by, check it out. Check out the rest of the content of the channel, and I'll see you next time. Have a good day.